Hello, I was back in St Ives, Cornwall last week to do a 3-day course at the St Ives School of Painting. The course was called Approaching Abstraction by artist Boo Mallinson. I was really excited when my Dutch art friend Jerry suggested doing this course because I've followed Boo on Instagram for a while now and really love her art. So these are just some shots from St Ives Harbour the night before the course was starting. We had a week of gorgeous weather and the colours in St Ives were stunning. For the first day we only focused on using black and white, and our first piece was just a huge mark making free loose exercise. Once we'd filled a sheet with random marks, we used paper viewfinders to pick out 3 smaller compositions that we liked the look of. These are the orange squares. We then cut those out. These had been done in pencil and charcoal, but we then added black and white paint to exaggerate the contrasts. Boo then had us sketching with charcoal again, but this time using a black and white photo as a reference. We were taught to focus very much on the contrast between the dark and light areas. We then taped paper to boards and divided our papers into 6 sections, and then headed off to the island in St Ives and made some similar charcoal sketches. Here's Jerry working on his. He carried all my stuff around for me, bless him, because I was on crutches. And here are my first 6 sketches. Back at the school, we selected 2 of our smaller sketches to make larger ones from. I chose one very abstract one and one which was more recognisably a landscape. We then added acrylic paint in black, white and a medium grey tone, and then went back in with charcoal again, picking out some of the details. We then copied these larger paper sketches onto MDF boards. So the top 2 here are my larger paper sketches, and the bottom 2 are the paintings on boards. I played around with the compositions slightly at this stage. So this was all the work that I'd done by the end of the first day. I'd found it really useful to simplify things to only black and white and focus on contrasts. I also really like picking out smaller compositions from bigger works in order to get abstract designs. It seems to take away some of the stress of coming up with an abstract composition. And here's a little look around the studio I was in. There were 10 of us altogether on this course. After school on the first day, it was still beautiful weather, so we went to Porthmeor Beach for a bit and hung out. On the second day, we introduced colour. We used acrylic paints in black, white, cerulean blue, yellow ochre and burnt sienna. And on huge mixing boards, we pre-mixed some colours with those. We started off doing another big, loose, mark-making, abstract type exercise. And then we moved on to making a large coloured version of a black and white photo. Boo had us just picking out the largest areas first of all and adding in some contrasts of light and dark. We then looked at layering and adding in more details. She then had us work on 3 smaller boards, again using the same limited palette, and some of these we based on our black and white sketches from the day before. Another exercise she had us do was to add colour on top of our black and white sketches from the day before. Boo encouraged the use of lots and lots of layers to keep adding interest, especially at the junction parts. Here is some of Boo's work, and you can see the amount of detail going on at the junctions between colours. Another shot of our lovely studio. These are my 3 smaller boards with more layers added on. And then we picked 2 of the designs to reproduce on larger boards. This is the first colour layer on those 2. And here they are again, with the different areas colour blocked in. We then took a quick break to look at everybody's little boards. Mine are the bottom right hand 3. Here they are again with some more layers added, plus some development of my 2 larger coloured boards. It was another lovely morning walking to school on our 3rd day. Today we were given 3 even larger boards and given free rein to do our own thing. I decided to work on 2 familiar landscapes and 1 total abstract. So this was what I did on the course, and I'll show you some of them in more detail later on. Also, whilst at the school, we got shown a little fisherman's loft which the school owns. It's used as a painting set nowadays. Hanging out on the beach again. This is the harbour at low tide. The day after the course, Jerry and I went to the Tate St Ives gallery. We were very interested in seeing the Ithell Colquhoun exhibition. Although not one of my favourite artists, we had studied her work on a previous course in St Ives, and so it was really interesting to see her work up close and in real life. Ithell Colquhoun often used the technique of decalcomania, where paint is applied to one surface and then pressed against another surface to transfer the design. Ithell then often painted around these really textured areas and incorporated them into her designs, so it was really interesting to see all of this texture up close in her work. These are some of her most famous paintings. She was a prominent figure in British surrealism and known for her exploration of occultism, androgyny, and the subconscious. So, not areas that I have an interest in, but as I say, still really interesting to see her techniques up close. And of course, we had to go in the Tate's stunningly beautiful atrium, looking out over Porthmeor Beach. And we also popped up to the Tate Cafe, where my husband and I and Jerry and his wife first met and struck up a friendship 2 years ago. I'm back at home now, and I thought I'd show you some of the work that I did a bit closer up. So this is the progression of one of the pictures. I started off with a compressed charcoal sketch out on the cliffs. Then I did a black and white version. This was done in charcoal first of all, with black and white paint added to it. And this was another black and white picture I'd done with the introduction of colour over the top of it. And you can see some of the different layers and marks made with different mediums and tools, which Boo encouraged us to do. Then I refined the composition a little bit and did the first pure colour one. Here you can see more clearly some of the dilute acrylic washes that I put over. Again, something that Boo encouraged us to try out. And then a bigger version of it. I wouldn't say that any of these are actually finished, but it was just really good to experiment with different things I've not been brave enough to try really. and use a lot more layering of thin washes than I have in the past with acrylics. The thinner lines were done with Caran d'Ache Neo Colour 1 crayons. I felt that the advantage of doing so many different renditions of the same scene were that they got more abstract each time, and I could introduce elements and remove elements as I went along. Boo also encouraged us to do collaging in our sketchbooks whilst we were waiting for paint to dry. She showed us her own sketchbooks where she'd torn up big paintings like the mark-making sheets we'd made earlier on and glued them down into very abstract leaning landscapes. So I brought home all the large paintings that I did, which were just the warm-up practice sheets on paper, and I'll probably really enjoy turning these into collages. When you look at them up close, there's lots of interesting little bits and colour variations to them. And here are some of Boo's own collages. She likes always working in a square format. And then here's another of my progressions from a small painting to a larger painting. Again, I wouldn't say that either of them are finished, but still good practice for layering and just trying out different things. And here's another progression from one of the sketches I did outside. It's actually looking out from St Ives towards the hill which is in my village, with Gadrivi Island and Lighthouse in between. There were lots of different layers and elements added to this one as I went along. And then onto the 3 large boards which I did on the last day. I'd chosen to do 2 of them based on paintings which I've done in the past. I wanted to see how I could incorporate some of Boo's teaching into the type of things that I'd already been doing. Again, I wouldn't say any of these are properly finished yet, but it was good to experiment and play, and I did like some of the textures that were emerging. This painting is of the view from the hill in my village back towards St Ives, which is the most distant headland. And then I definitely wanted to try out one of St Michael's Mount. I'm not completely happy with this, but I think I do like the direction it's heading in. It's a bit different from my previous work. And then finally, I'd also attempted a complete abstract. I decided to do this in the limited palette which we'd used on day 2 of the course. Boo was really encouraging of this painting, and I actually quite like how it turned out. There was a lot of looseness and freedom to it, which I don't normally achieve, though it actually felt a really scary thing to do. Finally, I'll just share a couple of the key things that I felt I learnt from doing this course. One of those is to get comfortable with making a mess. That's why Boo had us doing the big messy sheets at the beginning of each day. When you start off with a mess at the beginning of your painting, it actually gives you something to respond to. Boo also really emphasised the importance of layering. She says it's the history of the marks that give interest, and this isn't something which can be planned. She said that through repeated layering, you'll go on a journey of almost destroying your piece in order to move forward, but that you need to let go of your fear of failure, of validation, and of making a mess. I really enjoyed the course anyway. Boo Mallinson was a lovely tutor. And I feel like I've learnt some key new things which I can go away and incorporate into my work. It also felt really freeing and lovely to do some more abstract work. Though I think I need to work on getting over my fear of having people not understand abstract work and not enjoying it as much as regular landscapes. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, but I think that's been my subconscious perception. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed seeing a little bit about the latest course that I've been on. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye!